Honor, certainly, to be in the Roosevelt Room for 15 to 20 minutes with the president. So exclusive on this show today, we're releasing segments of that. We talked about everything. We were there for a historic bill signing of the VA. This is a president who's championed that, got a bill passed, signed it, and it's going to help hold people accountable at the VA. But also, obviously, a lot of news going on. Health care, the resistance movement, investigations. We asked President Trump about all of it, and this is what he had to say. Mr. President, thank you very much for joining Fox.
Thank you, Pete.
Appreciate it. You faced resistance on this bill, but of course you've faced resistance on the entirety of your agenda. Who's been your biggest opponent? Has it been Democrats resisting? Has it been fake news media? Has it been deep state leaks? When you think about it, what holds it up the most?
Well, you know, when I ran, I talked about the rigged system because I saw I was winning states and I wasn't getting the delegates that I should be getting. And, you know, I would look at this. I said, what kind of a system? Well, the whole system is there's a lot of bad things going on, a lot of very bad things going on. One of the things that should be solved, but it probably won't be, is that the Republicans and Democrats don't get together. And I'm open arms, but I don't see that happening. They fight each other. The level of hostility, and by the way, this isn't just Trump. This has been like this for years. You've been doing this for a long time. It's been like that for a long time. But the level of hostility, as an example, the health care bill that you are reporting on and everybody's reporting on, it would be so great if the Democrats and Republicans could get together, wrap their arms around it, and come up with something that everybody's happy with. It's so easy. But we won't get one Democrat vote, not one. And if it were the greatest bill ever proposed in mankind, we wouldn't get a vote. And that's a terrible thing. So there is. Well, look, their theme is resist. I've never heard of anything like this, resist.
How frustrating it is to have former President Obama. They're out there leading the resistance.
Well, I don't think he's leading it. He actually just put out a small statement. I don't see that leading it, but other people are leading. Don't forget, I saw Schumer criticizing the bill a couple of weeks ago, and he had no idea what was in the bill. He was saying this bill is this and it's that. He had no idea. In fact, the Republican senators didn't know because it wasn't released. Very few people knew. So he was criticizing a bill that he had no idea what was in the bill. But that's called the resistance. I mean, that's a terrible word. Think of it. Their theme is resist. Their theme should be, let's get together, envelop, let's get together. But their theme is resist. It's obstruction. And the problem is they become obstructionists. And the voters, I happen to like it from the standpoint of running for office, but I think it's a terrible theme in terms of getting elected. And more importantly, I think it's a terrible theme for the people of this country. Resist, obstruction. That's not what they want.
How do you overcome that when someone like Senator Warren, Elizabeth Warren, literally says people are going to die because of President Trump's health care bill?
Well, I actually think she's a hopeless case. I call her Pocahontas, and that's an insult to Pocahontas. I actually think that she is just somebody that's got a lot of hatred, a lot of anger.
But she's got a loud microphone. And
well, she does, but you know, I don't think she has the kind of support that some people do. I think she hurt Hillary. I watched her campaigning for Hillary. And she was so angry. Hillary would be sitting back listening to her, trying to smile. But there were a lot of people in that audience that were going, wow, is this what we want? There's a lot of anger there and hostility. So, no, I think she's a highly overrated voice.
Some people might say the lever of anger is unprecedented, but it's also unprecedented for a former president to come out the way President Obama has. He came out on Facebook recently. You may have seen it. He said, your bill, Mr. President, not a health care bill. It's a massive transfer of wealth. It's going to harm Americans. It's mean. What do you say to the former president?
Well, he actually used my term, mean. That was my term, because I want to see, and I speak from the heart. That's what I want to see. I want to see a bill with heart. Healthcare is a very complicated subject from the standpoint that you move it this way and this group doesn't like it. You move it a little bit over here. You have a very narrow path. And honestly, nobody can be totally happy, even without the votes. Forget about votes. This has nothing to do with votes. This has to do with picking a plan that everybody's going to like. I'd like to say love, but like. But we have a very good plan. We have a few people that are, I think you could say modestly, they're not standing on the rooftops and screaming. They want to get some points. I think they'll get some points.
Are Republican senators doing enough to have your back to get that health care bill through?
I think so. You know, I have great relationships with most of the people in the Senate, with, as you know, most of the people in the House. I think I I worked very hard. I made a lot of great friendships with the people in the House, a lot of them. Same thing in the Senate. They're 4 very good people. They're friends of mine. And I don't think they're that far off. I don't think they're that far off. You know, famous last words, right? But I think we're going to get there. For years, I've been watching the battle of health care. And I watched during the Clinton administration, Hillary, rightfully, devoted her life to trying to get health care. She was unable to get it. You watched what happened with Obamacare, which by the time they finished with it, it was, you know, something that doesn't work. But look what happened with Nebraska, where they gave the great Nebraska giveaway in order to give a vote.
Cornhusker kickback.
And it was a very closed session. You know, they talk about closed and behind closed doors. There was nothing more closed than Obamacare. But the bottom line is they worked so long and so hard. They got a plan that didn't work. They got a health care plan that didn't work. And I've only been there for 5 months. You know, they worked for a long time. During the Clinton administration, they worked essentially during the entire administration. Healthcare is a very, very tough thing to get, but I think we're going to get it. We don't have too much of a choice because the alternative is the dead carcass of Obamacare. That's what it is.
I opened up the failing New York Times and the Washington Post this morning. No mention at all of this bill that you're signing today. For veterans who are so passionate about this, it's such a historic bill. Are they going to cover this? And if they don't, why don't they cover it the way they cover every breathless scandal in the media today?
Well, I just heard today for the first time that Obama knew about Russia a long time before the election, and he did nothing about it. But nobody wants to talk about that. That the CIA gave him information on Russia a long time before they even, you know, before the election. And I hardly see it. It's an amazing thing to me. You know, in other words, the question is, if he had the information, why didn't he do something about it? He should have done something about it. But you don't read that. It's quite sad.
That never leaked out.
No, that doesn't leak out. No, they're very selective leaks with sources. I always love the sources, many of which don't exist. But no, there is a thing going on in the country, and hopefully it's somewhat of a sickness in that sense. But you know what? I am so proud of what we've done in such a short period of time.
Well, how's the newspaper this morning?
As that was going on, I was listening and reading my failing New York Times this morning. Not a single article in the main section about the historic VA bill the president signed yesterday. Yeah. And that's the last question I asked, is will it get covered? And it answered itself. Of course they didn't. More of what they want to talk about as opposed to the really important stuff that this White House is getting done.
Well, I think it just highlights the disconnect between the way the media, the mainstream media, is covering things and what's really going on. And he pointed to that directly. I mean, he sounded a lot more optimistic about getting things done, or the hope that they can, with health care, for example. He's saying, you know, the Republicans aren't that far apart, but if you watch the mainstream media or if you read the places like New York Times, you know, you have these 5 senators that still have not gotten to a yes vote. It seems like it's a total disaster, but that's not the reality of it.
Yeah. No, and these five senators may be moved in a certain direction. Democrats are totally not on board. But yeah. if you read any of the media coverage of this, the reasons that they're standing by and staying out of the fight on this is Medicaid. That's that's number one on their list. Medicaid and what they perceive as major cuts to Medicaid, and that there would be tax cuts for the rich. And so for Democrats, they're not going to come to the table at all on this.
And their rhetoric can only get more nasty as they impugn the motives of Republicans, when if you look at what they're actually doing with Medicaid, it's a gradual and gentle transition to a normal inflation rate on a program that can't pay for itself. It doesn't kick into effect till 2021. They're not looking, I mean, ultimately, Republicans need to be able to show that competitive insurance markets can work for the poor and the vulnerable and the sick, because that's what Democrats are going to say. You want to kick them off their health care? No, we don't. We think there's a better way to do it so the health care market doesn't collapse. Make that argument, and I think you can win and bring over these Republicans, because they're not that far off.
And it's a hard number, though.
Wants to get there.
It's a hard number, though, especially with the CBO numbers. And if the CBO numbers show that they're going to be millions more people are going to be losing their health care coverage, it's going to be hard for them to go back to their districts, which they will do this summer, and have to face those individuals which they had to face the last time this bill came up.
But President Trump pointed out health care is probably the most complicated thing that we are going to deal with as a nation. And we're seeing that with getting these votes together. I mean, it is complicated because everyone wants different things in it. Something else that stuck out to me in this interview, and it was a great interview, Pete, was just how frustrated he was. Someone that's coming to Washington, D.C. as a businessman, someone who understands politics, but has never really worked inside of D.C., just how hard it is to bring both parties to the table to actually have a real conversation about getting anything done.
Well, and like the VA legislation, right? The idea that I can't just fire someone who's incompetent or not doing their job. I have to sign legislation in order to fire people who aren't doing their job and taking taxpayer dollars and not helping veterans. Do you think that this will trickle into other parts of government?
I think it could. You raised that point, and it's a great one. Maybe other departments will realize if we can fire bad employees too, you can clean up government. I mean, this is a good governance thing, a major civil service reform that could happen elsewhere as well. But I'll tell you, what struck me a little bit being in the Roosevelt Room and a little bit in the Oval Office is this fury that everyone says he's involved in. Russia